Hi, today I wanted to cover off some options in our 2-bay NAS sequence, so we'll call it the best 2-bay NAS. We've got a few other different ones, specialist ones, silent ones, some different options, but these are the three I'm going to pick out for today, which is the TS-233, the TS-262, and the TS-264. So what we're going to do is have a look through each of them individually, a few specs, what they look like front and back. We'll do a bit of a comparison between the three. And then toward the end, I'm going to do a full setup from factory default straight out the box with the TS-264. Go through all the way through to the setup to setting up some storage. Then we'll do a little cut sequence while I go off and set up a few different things such as Plex, QVR Pro for surveillance, virtualization station for virtual machines, and then we'll talk about a few other features that are available once it's set up. So we'll jump straight into the first unit, which is the TS-233. So this is what it looks like from the front. So with the specs, you've got an ARM quad-core 2 GHz CPU in there, 2 gig of RAM as standard, 1 gig Ethernet port in the back, so just one of those. And it's also very, very energy efficient, about 10 watts in operation with 2 drives installed. If we have a look at sort of the size and dimensions of it here, that's what the back of it looks like. Very compact unit, very small. So the 2 drives are internal inside the chassis. You just sort of tip it over on the side. There's a small screw on the bottom that takes the side of the chassis off. We'll jump straight into the TS-262 now. So we get a bump on the CPU here. So it's a 2-core, 2-thread, up to 2.9 gigahertz. So a bit more speed on the CPU, and it's now an Intel CPU, so it's an Intel 64-bit Celeron. So you can see there just an idea of what all the different things are on the front of the NAS. This unit shares the same design as the next one, the TS-264. We've just changed the colors around a little bit. On the front there, you see it's got a 10 gig USB port. If I go around to the back, we also have another one of those 10 gig USB ports. One of the big differences here is the Ethernet port. So instead of a single 1 gig port, it's now a single 2.5 gig port. So you get more bandwidth. It will still work at 1 gig if you've got a 1 gig switch. That's no problem. Right at the top, we do have a PCIe slot now as well. So you can use that to expand the capabilities of the NAS. So you could add something like a 10 gig network card in there, some more M.2 slots, things like that. But it does also have 2 M.2 slots on the motherboard. So internal, inside the NAS, it does have options to put SSDs directly on it. So whilst it's a 2-bay, you can technically put 4 drives inside of it. If we move on to the TS-264, the CPU gets another bump here. So instead of 2 cores, 2 threads, it's now 4 cores and 4 threads. The same clock speed at 2.9 gigahertz. So it's the next level up in the Celeron series. So it's got a 10 gig USB, just like the previous unit. It also has at the very top there a PCIe slot, again for things like 10 gig cards or extra flash cards. But it does also still have those 2 M.2 slots inside as well. So looking through the ports, you've got HDMI. One of the big boosts here, though, is you've got 2 2.5 gig ports built in as standard now. So the previous 2 only had a single Ethernet port. This one has 2, and they're both 2.5 gig compatible. So that's the sort of end of the slides. Let's talk about a little comparison between the units. So they've all got different part numbers here. So we've got the TS-233. There's no extra RAM option on the end. It's just got the standard 2 gig on the inside the unit. We've got the TS-262-4G, so it's locked in at 4 gig of RAM. And then we've got the TS-264 8G. This one can go up to 16 gig of RAM though. So as we start scrolling down through some of the differences, I'll highlight a few of them. So with the system memory there, we've got 2 gig, 4 gig, then 8 gig. Again, with the RAM, we've got maximum memory of 2 and 4 on the first 2 units, but the TS-264 at the end can go all the way up to 16 gig with 2 8 gig modules. There is 2 RAM slots inside there. As we start scrolling down, we can see we've got the M.2 slots on the 2 Intel-based units. The ARM one does not have that as an option, and there are no PCIe slots to add in there or anything, so it doesn't have the capability to have dedicated SSD bays in addition to the 2 main bays. Those 2 main bays could have SSDs instead. You don't have to put hard drives, they can be SSDs, but that's a little comparison between the 2 units. Between the 3 units. So that's most things. The dimensions largely the same between a lot of the different ones. Power consumption is sort of one of the big differences. The more sort of horsepower the CPU has, the more electricity it will take to run that power. So you can see here the operating consumption of the TS233 is about 10 watts. We go up to sort of 12, 13 watts on the TS262, and a big jump up to the TS264, which has 29 watts. So that extra power has to come from somewhere, and it comes with the electricity consumption. So that's effectively the comparison between all the units. What I'm going to do now is a full setup of the TS264. So here's the unit. All I've done is took it out the box. I've installed 2 hard drives and 2 M.2 SSDs inside it, plugged the power cable in, plugged the network cable in, and turned it on. And this is the first screen that's going to greet me. So I've got an option here to start the smart installation. You have to accept the terms and conditions. I'll do that. So now you can do check for updates to see if there's any new firmware updates. So it says I'm already on the latest. That's great. I'll keep it there on the current version. But if you wanted to upload a manual one, you could do that here. Click next to go through the next part of the setup. So now it wants the NAS name. I'll keep it boring like I usually do and just call it TS-264. Username, I'll just put Craig. Password, I'll go with one of the ones I normally use. So I'll click next. Time zones, I'm just going to leave everything as default here. Click next. If you wanted to, you could set a static IP address here. I'll let it be obtained for this part. No need to set it, but if you wanted to, you could do it. And here is where you can see both Ethernet ports, because this one has 2. I've only got 1 connected. So we'll click next. This is for firmware updates, so you can choose which level. So there are lots of different levels for how you want the firmware updates to be. So the default is notify me about them, but do not do the update. I would normally recommend at least the top options. So automatically install critical updates. This will be things like security patches and things like that. So I'm going to change it to that one, and then you get to choose when is that going to happen. So maybe midnight's a bit too soon. I'll say 3 a.m. for me. So you can change that around to different options that you need to that suits you. A quick summary of all the settings you've chosen, and then you click apply. It's going to warn you that it's going to empty the drives. If there's any data on them, it will erase them doing this. So I'm happy to do that. So I'll click initialize. Now it's going to go off and do that. This is going to take a few minutes. So I'll just go silent while this process happens, and we'll put this on fast forward. When it comes back, it'll want me to log into the NAS. I'll come back and start talking through the next steps once we get to that stage. Okay, so that's the NAS all set up, ready to go. So now it wants me to log in with the username and password that I set up during that first setup wizard. So I'm just going to type those in now. Don't need to save the password. So I'm going to click continue, scroll down the data privacy notice, click continue. And now it's logging in, and now it's giving me some sort of hints and tips of how to use the OS. Some main menu up there, control panel there, app center there. Some user access settings up there. So now it's going to go through, automatically open up the storage and snapshots application, which is going to ask me to go ahead and set up a storage volume. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go across to the storage/snapshots option on the left. It's telling me I've got no volumes and or storage pools. So the first step is create a storage pool. So I'm going to do a new storage pool. Click start. We've got some options here if you want to use self-encrypting drives, Q-tier. I'm going to leave that off for now. So now it's asking me to pick the drives. So we can see here I've got 2 20 terabyte WD drives, and I've also got 2 1 terabyte WD M.2 SSDs. So the only drives I'm going to select at the moment are the hard drives, so the bottom 2 drives. I'm going to leave the SSDs free for a SSD cache later, so I'll set that up a bit later. It's automatically selected RAID 1 for me. I'm happy with that. So you've got options for JBOD, RAID 0, RAID 1. The other options are grayed out because I can't do those with just 2 drives. So I'll leave that on RAID 1 that it's automatically suggesting. It's giving me the total capacity I'll have there. I'll click next. It's asking me if I want to reserve some space for snapshots. I'll untick that for now, but if you're going to use it, you can use it. And you've got an alert threshold of 80%. I often untick that and use a thick volume with the alert threshold on the volume instead. But I'll just leave that like that for the moment. We'll click next. Happy with all those options, little summary, and I'm going to click create. Just again, another warning that all data on those disks will be erased by doing this. Do I want to continue? Yes, happy to do so. So this is going to go off. It'll take a couple of minutes to do this. Once it's finished, it's going to prompt me that now I have a storage pool. I should create a volume. So a new volume button will appear in a minute. I'll come back and start talking when we get to that stage. Okay, and now it's saying that the storage pool has been created. Now I should get a new volume, so I'm going to say yes, I'll have a new volume. I'm going to leave it on default here, so thin volume is fine. You can read the different options and choose which is best for you, but for me, thin volume is fine. If you have more than one storage pool, you get to choose it here. I've only got the one at the moment, so that's why there's no options there. I'm going to click next. So with thin provisioning, it is just warning that you should monitor the space, which is fine. We'll click OK. So now you get to choose the size of the volume, the name of the volume, things like that. Let's create it at a nice round 10 terabytes, let's say. I'll leave it called Data Vol 1, that's fine. You can enable encryption if you need to. There's a few advanced settings down here if you want to automatically create a share, change block sizes of the volume, things like that. I'm fine with how it is, so I'm just going to click next. You can enable snapshots if you want to. I'm going to leave that off for the moment. Don't need it for this setup. And then just a summary of everything we've chosen, and I'm going to click finish. So now it's going to go off and create the volume, format it, get it ready. So it's going to take a few minutes. Once that's done, we should have a storage pool and a volume. So right now it says formatting. I'll wait for it to say ready, and then we'll come back and just sort of summarize what the next steps are. Okay, so there we go. We've got a ready storage pool, a ready data volume. The NAS is now effectively ready to go. I can start using it. I can start creating shares, copying data and installing applications. So it's says they're synchronizing. So because I've created a redundant RAID, it is doing a RAID synchronization. So it's effectively building the redundancy. So that'll take a little while. You can click on the status of that at the top here, and it'll tell you how long it's going to take. The NAS is busy right now doing optimization on the new volume I've created. So it does slow down the synchronizing. So that's why it looks like it's going to take a very long time. That's going to speed up significantly as soon as this optimizing task is finished. But that task is dependent on how many drives, how big they are, how big your total RAID size is. So it just does depend on a few different factors to how quick that will complete. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off, install a few different apps, get them set up with some usable data and use cases, and then I'll come back and show you everything that this TS264 is capable of. Mine is fairly standard. I don't have any upgrades done to it. It's just got the standard 8 gig of RAM in it. I haven't added any PCIe cards or anything like that. Just 2 hard drives with 2 SSDs. That's it, and I'm going to go and set it up for a few tasks just to show you what you can do with it. So I'll be back after I've got those set up. Okay, right, I've now done all the installation of all the extra apps that I wanted to do. So the first one we'll talk about, or features if you like, is in storage and snapshots. As part of the setup that I did enable a cache acceleration. So I used the 2 SSDs as a read-write cache for everything. Other uses you could use for those SSDs could be a dedicated separate volume that's just faster if you needed it, such as for virtual machines. But I have set those up as a cache. So when we go and look at the disks now, we can see that out of the 4 total drives that I've got here, the 2 SATA drives that I've got, the 20 terabyte WDs, they're in there and they're working as my main volume for my shares. And then I've got the other ones, so instead of saying data next to them, the SSDs are saying cache next to them. So they're used as a RAID 1 cache. So that's something that I've set up, and that's a great use for those 2 SSD slots that are in there. One of the other features that I've got installed now is Plex Media Server. So if I click that, it's going to open up all the settings for Plex. So I can go through and set up a bunch of stuff with Plex if I want. But mainly this is set up now. I haven't added any source material or anything, but this is just what standard Plex looks like when you first sign into it. You can go in and add different libraries and media. One of the best things about Plex on this NAS is it does have a built-in GPU. So if you go into the settings and come down to transcoder, If you have a Plex pass, it's going to enable you to enable hardware accelerated video transcoding. So that's what I've got enabled here. It does let you pick the GPU. So if you did happen to have a NAS that's got more than one GPU, you can select it here. I'm going to leave it on auto, so it's picked up the device just fine. But because this NAS does have an onboard GPU with the CPU that's included, you can use hardware accelerated transcoding with it, and it's quite powerful, quite effective on this NAS. So that's Plex that I've got running on this NAS. Other things that I've also got running is QVR Pro. So QVR Pro is our surveillance software. So with QVR Pro here, what I've done is I've allocated 1 terabyte of my NAS storage to the camera recording. And I've added a few of the cameras I've got dotted around the house here. So I've got driveway, front garden, side of drive, and doorbell. So I've got those added in. And this is basically what it looks like. I've got those 4 channels that match here in the viewing software. And this is going to allow me to record all the data for my NAS. I can go through all the different views I want. If I had a pan tilt and zoom camera, sorry, I could go through and look at it. I can do lots of cool stuff. I can save this as a view if I wish. I can just look at a specific camera, so maybe I just want to look at the doorbell camera. I can create things like regions of interest on the frame, so it automatically puts one up. Maybe I wanted to look at an area of leaves or something like that. You can save this as a view so that it's going to remember what this looks like. If I go to front garden, something maybe a bit more interesting to zoom in on, let's say the red telephone box there over the road. So here I can zoom in and have a bit more of a look at the red telephone box if I want to, and I can create that as a view. And you can do multiples of these, and you can save them all as a view. So there's the second box. Maybe on this one I want to look at this this tree stump that's down here, so I can focus on that. And you can just keep adding them for whatever sort of area you're looking at. Maybe you want to check out what that car looks like. So, but over here I've got an untitled view, so I could click save on that and say front garden multiple views as an option that I've done. But this is the QVR Pro client that goes with the QVR Pro server you run on the NAS. So that's what I've got running on this NAS here. And it works absolutely fantastic. So this particular NAS I've got currently Plex Media Server, QVR Pro, as well as our virtualization station. If I go look at the dashboard right now, I can see out of the 8 gig of RAM that I've got inside the NAS, I'm using about half, so 45%. I'm only using a small fraction of the CPU power for everything so far. So why not run something else? So what I'm going to do now is open up Virtualization Station. This is the hypervisor that we offer for free with the NAS. Go up here and say I want to create a virtual machine. VM name, so let's call it Ubuntu, because I am doing an Ubuntu one. It's automatically selected from what I've typed there. The OS it thinks I'm going to use, which is correct. I'm going to install that one. Where do I want to put it? I did create a virtual shared folder, so I'll say I'll put it in there. Click OK, click Next. And now you get to choose how you want to set it up. So I'll give it all the CPU cores, 2 gig of RAM, that's fine. All the other settings are fine. 250 gigs, no problem. Network adapter is fine. Now I do have to give it the ISO file for where the installation file is for that operating system. So I did put that on the NAS here. So I'll say OK, click Next, click Create. So that's effectively creating a virtual machine on the NAS as well. So I can come down here, I can see it, so I can tick a box, I can do an action, I can start that VM, I can log into it, I can go through the installation of it, but this is everything running on this this one machine. So if I open it up, it's going to let me look in it, so I can try or install Ubuntu, so I can say yeah, go for it. So that's going to go off and do the installation of an Ubuntu virtual machine. I can close it. It's still going to do everything in the background, but you can see now the CPU usage is climbing because it's obviously doing something now. If I click the dashboard here, we can see the RAM is starting to climb because the virtual machine's starting to use more. But yeah, this is just a standard. This is the TS264. Again, I've done no upgrades to it, just put 4 drives in it. It's got 8 gig of RAM. You can upgrade it to 16 gig. Just a 4-core, 4-thread Intel Celeron. Handling all these multiple tasks just great, and at the end of the day it can still be a backup for your laptops, do cloud backups for your data, store any files that you need to do. But this is the TS264 with multiple different applications, and we have an app center full of different options. I've just picked a select few, but we do have a lot of different apps in here for you to choose from. So if you wanted to go and pick a different task, we have a lot of different choices. So yeah, that's the end of the video. We've covered off the TS233, the TS262, and a full setup, installation and demo of some apps of the TS264. If anybody has any questions, please do let me know in the comment section down below, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.